You got what?
Hey, that is not what she said.
Well, give it to me now.
No, I'll do that.
Oh, I got nothing. What's your group called, the strike force or something like that?
Yes.
He wrote it down for you on PowerPoint, you said to read.
Oh, well, I can't see it. They need to make the font
You can't
bigger.
read that, you're worse than me.
All right, gentlemen, we're going live on YouTube.
Okay, your head.
We need to make that font bigger, that's what.
Are they running into an issue? Well, that's what they said.
We throw some on the wire.
I got one named County Resident. I don't know all these names. I know Panis, I know Tucker, I know Fiji, I know Sarah, I know Michelle. County Resident, and Ian, I don't know who some of these people are.
Police Board meeting. We have new video equipment, so hopefully this will be a more functional but duller meeting than the one we had last month. Would you read the roll?
Commissioner Gardner,
Here.
Commissioner Hassler,
Here.
Commissioner Price,
Here.
Commissioner Punch,
Here.
Commissioner Schwerin.
Here.
I believe we have 2 deputizations today. Would those officers come forward? Okay, Marvin Eaton
Oh, yes, sir.
and David Olney. Very good. If you'll repeat your name and then follow after me. I,
David Owen. David Owen.
okay, and Marvin. Okay, do solemnly swear
Do solemnly swear
that I am a citizen of the United States
that I am a citizen of the United States
and a resident of the state of Missouri,
and a resident of the state of Missouri,
that I will support the Constitution
that I will support the Constitution
and the laws of the United States,
and the laws of the United States,
the state of Missouri,
the state of Missouri,
and the charter ordinances of St. Louis County,
and the charter ordinances of St. Louis County,
that I will faithfully adhere to the regulations
that I will faithfully adhere to the regulations
provided in the rules and procedures for deputization
provided for the rules and procedures of deputization
as adopted by St. Louis County,
as adopted by St. Louis County,
and that I will faithfully demean myself
and as I faithfully commit myself
as a deputized officer
as a deputized officer
of the St. Louis County Police
of the
Department.
St. Louis County Police Department.
So help me God.
So help me God.
Very good. And let me sign these for you, and I will hand them to you. There you go. And congratulations.
Thank you, sir.
All right, now we will proceed with our open discussion meeting. And the first item on the agenda is a budget update.
Hello, I'm Joyce Hill. I work in the Fiscal Services Unit, and I was asked to give you an update on the budget. So at this time, we are in the end of our third quarter, and we are on target for having spent 72% of the budget. Each year, about this time, it gets a little challenging because, you know, we've been spending a lot, and this year the bigger challenges have been the COVID expenses. The county appropriated an additional $2 million for us because we were using our budget to fund COVID expenditures. But so far we spent 3.7 for COVID. So we are incurring those expenses, and the county is working to move those to the CARES Act fund and the FEMA grant. So right now that's a little struggle, but we made some projections assuming that those are funded. And we think that at the end of the year, we will have some challenges with overtime. We're about 2.4 million over in overtime, and a big part of that was because of the protests in the summer, and also the COVID expenditures, which hopefully will be funded. That and we have some surpluses in the fringe benefit rates, which are helping us to balance all that out. But at this time, we're pretty close to thinking that we're going to make it by the end of the year without an additional appropriation. Of course, if anything arises, we will have to address the council about helping us out if we need it. Have any questions?
So is the 2.4 million in overtime separate from the 3.7 that has been spent on?
Yes, the 3.7 for COVID expenditures includes like PPE, the hotel, things like that. That's a completely different number. So we are 1.7 over what the county gave us for those expenditures. So once we get reimbursed for those, that'll make us even in that way. But the overtime,
Any other questions?
Good morning. I'm Sergeant Tom Naughton. I'm the coordinator for the body camera program for the police department. I have one other employee that's assigned to the body cam, 50 cars with in-car camera systems operational. There are additional 70 cars that have the tracking units and the GPS data, but do not have cameras. Those are supervisor vehicles assigned to patrol. The officers who are assigned the cameras would be all the patrol officers. We have currently started training some of the SROs that will not be returning to schools. Right now, they're doing patrol activities, so we gave them some cameras and brought them back up to speed. So we have probably roughly about 620 body cameras in use right now. We just recently outfitted 5 of the 6 prisoner conveyance vans. Each van's equipped with 3 cameras in it now on the transport compartments. There's one forward-facing camera also that would record any type of traffic incident or collision that the van might be involved in. We are outfitting vehicles one at a time as they come in. As the replacement goes, the vendor still owes 24 installs, so that's still something that we've already prepaid for. So they're coming in and coordinating that with us. We're at 50 terabytes of data so far from January 1st. We're averaging about 2 terabytes of data a week. It's a lot of data to manage between 2 employees, so you guys might have some other questions too, reference the training and that, or.
How long do we keep the data?
There are 3 tiers in which the data's kept. Right now, there's a 30-day, but we're switching it to a 1-year retention. That will give the supervisors and anyone that needs access to that particular type of video ample time to look at it and review it. 30 days just simply wasn't enough. We were finding early on that a citizen might call and want some information about something, a supervisor would go to review it, and it was a recording that was not mandated to be kept more than 30 days, and just by chance they'd call on day 31 or 32, and that video evidence isn't there for the supervisors and the citizen to look at. So we were moving that to 1 year. Then there's a 7-year, which is pretty much any enforcement action, and then there's it's a lifetime set for 99 years. But we'll keep it forever. Those are any serious crimes, any officer involved, shootings or use of force, or anything felony related.
Did you mention how long it will take to outfit all of the vehicles?
All the vehicles that are currently in the fleet are currently outfitted that will be getting cameras. We just replace them as a car gets replaced. We're doing that. Both Officer Clinton and myself are certified installers, so if it's just one vehicle, we'll actually take the time and just wire that car up ourselves. It takes about 3 hours. But when they get like the new vehicle purchase in, when we get a fleet of 20 new replacement cars, the company comes back in and does the complete installs for us.
So what is the process to request viewing of body cam footage or car footage after the fact?
For a citizen to do that, or?
No, just a supervisor. Well, I guess now that you've raised it, yes.
Okay, so that would just be an open record request, just like any other document that the police department has, police reports, and that goes through the custodian of records.
Okay, and then will the custodian contact you and you pull it?
Yeah, what they do is they'll say request was received for footage relating to whatever the incident was. We'll look at it, we'll review how much footage is actually there, and then we provide a written estimate of how long it would take to review it and to provide any redactions if necessary, and then produce it onto a CD or DVD. So as far as supervisors and that, they're allowed to review for report purposes. There are some restrictions on what a supervisor can and can't do with the video. Obviously, they're not just looking at things to find things. If a citizen comes in and wants to make a complaint or question an encounter with them, they certainly can review the video and look at it up until that point where they see that it did happen or didn't happen, and then they follow the normal course of complaint from there.
I want to make sure I understand. All of our patrol cars are equipped with cameras.
Correct, all the marked
Yes.
police cars?
Yes, except supervisors. Supervisors may not have.
The supervisors are not issued body cameras, and they don't have cameras in their cars, but they're using the same communication system, the comm system.
Okay, so supervisors don't have body cameras either.
Correct,
But all patrol officers who are dealing with the public do have body
that's
cameras.
correct.
What about detectives and people who are not patrol officers?
The only ones outside of patrol that have cameras right now would be our tactical operations unit, our highway safety officers, Metrolink officers, and K-9 unit.
Thank you. Any other questions?
I'm sorry, special response unit also has cameras too.
Very good. Any other questions for the sergeant? Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you for your time.
Gun violence.
Good morning, all. Good to see everybody again. My name is Lieutenant Craig Longworth. I'm the commander of the Bureau of Crimes Against Persons. And hopefully you all can see what's on the screens above here. We're going to start off. If I can get this to work. There we go. Okay. So we're going to start off with, we call this the wedding cake. So, at any rate, it shows at the top, the 153. This is from January 1 to the present. Investigated by the Crimes Against Persons Unit is 153 cases. That includes assault first degrees, where the shootings involved where persons injured, armed robberies, and homicides. Below that, you'll see where there has been investigated by the St. Louis County Police Department. That would be basically Patrol Division and other members, SRU and what have you, 752 cases. A lot of those cases will involve basically shooting into a dwelling where no one was actually struck. And there's several of those cases, and then you have other cases where people are shooting at cars or shooting at people and no one's hit. Those type of cases will be investigated by the patrol units. Below that, you see the shot spotter alerts. It's a rather large number, 4,430 shot spotter alerts. In those cases, basically I can tell you that there's a lot of that is we don't necessarily have, and I'll go through a slide here in a minute that tells you more about that. But essentially those cases, you could have 20 gunshots go off and that's 20 alerts, okay? So those numbers appear kind of large. Below that, you'll see it says unknown crime at the bottom there. There's a lot of crime we know that happens that goes unreported. Some of it's domestic violence, some of it's just shootings where people don't want to report it. And I'm not saying where they're injured, but there'd be some sort of shots fired or whatever. And a lot of that is unreported. We don't have any idea how to count for that, but there is a lot of that, okay? I can move this forward, okay? Aggravated assaults with firearms by year. Our jurisdiction has seen an increase in aggravated assaults with firearms and homicides. Through the end of August of 2020, there have been 550 aggravated assaults with firearms. At this same point in 2019, there were only 427. Not only, but there was 427. There's a 28.8% increase in aggravated assaults this year. I don't know why we're bouncing around here. Okay, aggravated assaults with firearms, there can be more than one offense in the same incident. If there are multiple victims, the incident gets counted with multiple offenses. That's all FBI statistics that we have no choice on, okay? So basically you could have 5 people in a house, and if that house is shot up, there's 5 victims or 5 offenses, okay? In 2019, there were 431 incidents with 630 offenses. 73.7% of those incidents had 1 offense. Through August of 2020, there have been 345 incidents with 550 offenses. 67% of those incidents have 1 offense. So, if you have questions, please stop me and ask. I'll do the best I can do with that. Next map. Okay, is a heat map. I'm sure you're all familiar with that. Basically, this is a 2019 heat map. There's really no difference. The heat map has remained the same. This year, pretty much the same as it was in 19. Homicides, through September 14th of 2020, the Crimes Against Persons Unit, or Bureau, has investigated 43 homicides, 32 for St. Louis County patrol areas, and 11 for other municipalities. 84% of those homicides were committed with a firearm as the weapon. We currently have a clearance rate of 91%, which I'm sure you all realize is still very high. A lot of the reasons for that is witness cooperation. That's a very important component to the department's investigations. And I'd like to tell you that we have some of the most dedicated homicide detectives that there are. I mean, these guys and gals are amazing. They do great work every day. The homicide motives, most of the common motives so far in 2020 has been unknown, and that's simply because the ones we haven't solved we don't know just yet. And sometimes when we solve a case and the individual doesn't talk, we have no way of knowing what the actual motive was. I can tell you though, there have been 4 justifiable homicide investigations so far this year. One of those involved an officer-involved shooting investigation, which was not our department. We handled it for another department. The other 3 were citizen-involved shootings where they shot somebody in self-defense. Okay? When you look at the motive, if you can see that, hopefully you can all see that on the pie chart there. Child overdoses makes up for 7%, and those are cases where individuals leave narcotics laying around, typically fentanyl, and these children, very small children, usually ingest it and unfortunately die, and then we were able to prosecute those cases. Domestic makes up about 7%, robberies about 12%, personal feud is one of our biggest categories. Quite frankly, I don't know of any way to stop that. That's one of those cases where somebody's mad at somebody, they beat him at a house or wherever, and shoot him. I can't think of any way to avoid those type of situations. Okay? Our homicide victims remains pretty constant throughout the years, although we had one year, I think I may have addressed this before, where we had a lot of female victims. We're not seeing that as much this year. So far in 2020, the age range is 0 to 68 years of age, with the average age of 30.4. And you can tell that the majority of these are male. And several African American victims and some white victims. Basically, I would say that's predominantly be the African American males. But they are no longer 17, 18-year-old kids, typically they're a little older. Moving forward to ShotSpotter. Okay. ShotSpotter activations are higher this year than they were last year. 253 reports were connected to ShotSpotter events, 42 reports for incidents of aggravated assaults. Some had multiple victims. 2 of those reports were for homicides. What's really important to note about this ShotSpotter system, this is really good for us because we have had cases, I think I've addressed this before in regard to this, where the officers respond to a ShotSpotter activation, they find a victim right away, where in the past, without this system, we may have never known that this victim was there until somebody walks along and finds this individual, and then we're starting way back 48, 60 hours after the investigation should have began right away. So this has really been a very good tool for us. Okay? And we're going to move forward to what are we trying to do to make things better. First of all, I want to let you know in the homicide investigations, of course, that's kind of where I like to talk about. The guys up there and gals up there have extensive training. The cases are worked by a team of at least 6 detectives and a supervisor. All leads are investigated. Nobody goes home until all leads are exhausted. We have an extensive use of technology. We have a prosecuting attorney, Mr. Bell's office, who sends an attorney out to every case, which is very good for us. It helps us with legal matters right on the scene. And the one thing we really still enjoy, and we're very thankful for, is good community support. A lot of success from our prosecutions comes from that community support. As far as what are we doing to try to stop some of this gun violence as much as we can. We have the St. Louis Gateway Strike Force that is pretty much started by our department and our drug unit. And pretty much the way that works, it's a group that consists of the FBI, HSI, DEA. There's several groups that are involved in this, but what they do is they focus on dismantling the networks of violent offenders, street gangs, homicides, gang activity, and illegal firearms, distributors, and dangerous drug trafficking. These guys do a tremendous job with that, and they work it every day, and we use them a lot in the homicide unit as well. All the guns that we seize, and to date, I can tell you we have 960 guns that have been seized from the street. That's all over St. Louis County, just our department. I will tell you this, I cannot tell you that all 960 have been involved in actual crimes. Sometimes they're seized for safekeeping. for many reasons, okay? But I will tell you this, a good number of those guns are definitely taken, they're involved in some sort of a crime. Those guns are entered into NIBIN, which is the National Integrated Ballistic Information Network, and I'm pretty sure you all are familiar with NIBIN, and that connects those guns to other crimes that have occurred throughout St. Louis City, St. Louis County, it could be from anywhere actually. So that's an important part of our stuff. Also, our first precinct is currently working, has been for some time, with the ATF on gun violence initiatives. Basically what they do is they develop targets between our department and the ATF. These are usually violent offenders that are out here committing crimes with guns. They target these folks and then they try to make a case on these guys, and then they do both prosecutions from both state and federal levels. Typically your charge would be possession of a felon in possession of a firearm, cases like that. Our department as well, including my bureau, whenever these guys have a case involving a firearm of a homicide or an assault first, we do the same thing. After that gun's entered into NIBIN, of course, one of the things we do if we're charging, we can charge on a state level or a federal level. That typically depends on the type of crime it is and a conversation with the prosecutor's office, both federal and state. And by the way, they work very well together. We have never had an issue with that. Yes?
Can you speak up a bit?
Oh, I'm sorry.
More direct.
Okay. One of the other things we do, and we are partnered with the Homicide Ministers Alliance. I've spoken to you all before about that group. And basically, when we have a homicide investigation, information is given to our homicide ministers. They make contact with the family, of the victim's family. Sometimes, as I told you, personal feud is a big deal out here, so they will get with that family and try to make sure that we can kind of keep things down and hopefully not have further problems. They also offer support, we'll say support in the form of let's use psychiatric support for the family, things of that nature, and sometimes often help them with bills and other issues that come up with that. We've been very successful with that program. Oftentimes people don't want to speak to us right away, but they will tell the minister something, and then the ministers can talk to us and we can get back with the family and try to work out whatever their needs may be. Okay? In addition to that, we have some other private individuals, which I cannot identify those individuals right now, or I will not identify them at this point, but they will oftentimes help us if we have a situation where somebody doesn't want to tell us something, but they're afraid to, or one thing or another. These folks can oftentimes facilitate a meeting with us and them, and that's been very successful for us. I'm not sure. Pretty much the end of my presentation. Unless anybody has any questions, I'd be more than happy to answer what I can.
I've got a couple of questions.
Yes, ma'am.
The first one goes way back, you showed a heat map, what is that?
What that is basically, I wish I could get back to it for you, but I'll try. Anyway, basically what that means is it's just a group, it shows you where most of the crimes are occurring, that particular type of crime. So the dark red, and I was just gonna have a voice.
I'm doing it.
Oh, you're doing it. You did it. Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, I have no idea what's going on here. There's a lot happening. Anyway, I'm sorry, Commissioner. So essentially what happens is where you see the dark red, there's more crime there than anywhere else. And oddly enough, it's pretty consistent between strictly cases on aggravated assaults. I can tell you that it's probably pretty consistent with all of our crime. It's pretty much concentrated in those areas. Does that help?
It does. The
Okay.
other thing is, could you provide a copy of your presentation?
Yes, ma'am, we can do that. Yes,
Thank you.
ma'am. Any other questions?
Can I ask, what does our crime victim, sorry, trying to make sure you can hear me, crime victim support look like? Is there a specialized unit that's connected to your unit, or is it a
There
separate
is,
effort?
yes, doctor, there is one group that we use for domestic violence. And we actually have an advocate that is in our offices, and that advocate contacts every single domestic violence victim, regardless whether the crime's a misdemeanor or felony. They make contact with them, they offer support services, and oftentimes we have other things we can do if there's a need in regard to safety plans, things like that. Also in our human trafficking stuff, we have a separate advocate for that. And pretty much that advocate does a very good job of being able to assist us in placing people and helping with various needs. Aside from that, you have victim services unit for our homicide cases, assault cases, robbery cases. And clearly they're very successful. That's a state group that we work with on a daily basis as well.
And, I didn't see substance, drugs, illicit substances on your list of causes. You know, that the issues of disrespect and personal feud, or that 25% same in the city, it just, that number won't move. But drug-related offenses, do you think some of the uptick is related to that? Do you have a sense, what do you think is happening? Because the trajectory that we're on is extremely concerning.
Well, I can tell you this, the drug cases now, we don't have a lot of our cases that are necessarily drug-related. There's almost always drug use involved, whether it's from the perpetrator, sometimes the victims, okay? But to be truthful with you, our percentages aren't that high in that, okay? I think that the unknown category, again, is very high, and sometimes it could very well be that's what's related to, but until I can determine it, I won't put it down as what that motive is.
And I guess, why do you think we're in the situation that we're in now?
Well, that's a rather hard question.
We have to have another
Doctor.
meeting for that, I know, I'm sorry.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of things that come to mind, but to be honest with you, I mean, I think obviously there's more guns on the street, I think we all realize that, and there's a lot more thefts of guns, that's involved. A lot of things come back to just family, you know, I mean, as a young policeman, I can tell you, every corner had a church, and people were at church, and you saw a lot of that going on. I'm not saying there's still not that going on, but I see less of that now. That may have something to do with it, I don't know. I wish I could answer that. If I could answer that, we'd probably have a lot less crime. Any other questions, folks?
I got a quick question.
Yes, sir.
What on the homicide success rate, what is the national average?
61.5% typically, stays about that every year.
And I just wanted to, make note of that, just to show how impressive the 91% is in St. Louis County, and I want to say thank you for that, and I know it's a team effort, but that's very impressive to us.
Well, I actually appreciate that, and I'm sure my staff does as well. Thank you.
Any other questions? All right, thank you very much.
Thank you all.
Okay, there was a written response, summary response to Commissioner Punch's letter. Do we want to discuss the chief members?
Morning, everyone. Or afternoon, still morning. Last meeting, we presented our answers to these, and I had the individual commanders who spoke to these issues give me a short summary of what they talked about. But because it is short and not complete, I brought the commanders back here. So if there are specific questions that you have, I will bring the commanders up here to address them. Or if it's something I can answer, I would be happy to. Does anybody have any questions?
I have some comment. Commissioner Punch had indicated that roughly a third of the recruits are black, but only 10% remain, and that means, correct me if I'm misunderstanding, that by graduation time, we have lost a number of people. And I just wondered if that number is reflective of all racial groups, or is it particular to black recruits, so that we might need to consider a special program?
I understand the question.
That's the
Mr.
nature
Becker,
of my
would you
question.
care to come and address that, please?
First week, we will get somebody who drops out. We've had somebody drop out on the first day. They just determine it's just not for them and they drop out. And there's no race pattern. In fact, the people that I can recall, just off the top of my head, have all been white. So I don't see a pattern in that regard.
So following up with that question, not talking about the current class, but just in general, if the pattern is that, let's say, out of a class, you have 25 black recruits, but by the end of the training, you're down to 50.
And no, I don't see that kind of pattern at all. We're losing any particular group faster than any other. I think it's spread across the board. You know, we may lose somebody.
All right, other questions or concerns about the responses?
Is my understanding correct? I'm looking at the response to the crisis intervention training. It's on page 7 of the document. And, the question presented was, half of the department is trained. Are there plans to train the other half? Is that a goal to get everybody trained? And the response talks about the limitations of COVID, and I completely understand that the past 6 months have provided significant challenges in training as well as other activities within the department. But are we moving forward with smaller classes? Is the plan to continue moving forward?
We had our first class in August, but normally our classes had about 50 people in them. It was limited to 25, so that class went through. And I spoke to the people at the academy, and next year there are between 4 and 5 classes planned. If it goes through, like we lift the protections of COVID or the qualifications of COVID, and we could put 50 people in there, we could get about 250 people through a year. So it would be doable in 2 to 2.5 years to get all these people trained. If the qualifications still exist, then it's doubled the time that we have to do. But yes, there are plans moving forward to train the officers.
So even if it takes twice as long, we're still moving forward?
Yes, we're still moving in that direction.
And the reason we're doing 25 per class instead of 50 per class isn't a financial reason, it's COVID.
It's COVID.
It's COVID for the safety of the.
And to make sure we're in line with Dr. Page's sanctions.
Sure. Okay, very good, thank you.
I just want to thank the team for putting time into considering these issues. I want to emphasize, because I don't think anyone heard me say last month, that this is not me. It's going to be very easy for this to look like this is me saying things because I somehow think I understand something and I feel like I need to say it. It is not. It's really me representing the voices of people in our community, as well as 4 extremely rich, well thought out documents. And while there's a lot of work in here that I know is actually ongoing even now to try to address this, I'm still somewhat concerned there's a posture of we have to tell you why actually this is not a problem. And I just want to reiterate, this is not me saying, county department, this is a thing that I think is wrong. That's not that at all. This is me serving the public and the work of many people in this region to try to make a better way forward, focused and centered on equity. So I think it can't be an open and closed, oh, here's the question, here's the answer, we're done. But that we have to continue to grapple with these issues. And I'm really liking how we're continuing to have presentations and updates, and I'm hoping these core issues of training, diversity, transparency, accountability, recruitment, and use of force continue to be in our dialogue. This was not a open and done thing for me. This is, let's find a way to discuss what our community is the most concerned about. So in that, I really, really, really appreciate the fact that you all even considered this and did so much to try to grapple with the issues already. So let's just keep going. That's my bottom line.
Well, thank you very much, Dr. Punch, and I do want to say that I got last the time that it was just not about your thoughts moving forward, and these were the thoughts of the community. And I want you to know that this police department, my commanders and the men and women of this police department are committed to moving this police department further in diversity and inclusion and all of the community projects that we've started, because we think this is a regional problem and an area problem and a department problem, and we're gonna continue the work.
Yeah, I'd like to thank you too for the letter. I thought it was very thoughtful. It addressed a number of things that we need to keep our eye on and see what we can do better, whether or not we're doing as well as we can. Can we do better? And there are two things I'd like to look at, maybe at the next meeting. You know, we discuss it at page 3, how we keep track of officers' use of force and problems. And I'd like to have a more thorough discussion of that, so that we and the people can know that we're doing the best we can relative to determining use of force things with BPS and the matrix. And then the other is the St. Louis Area Violence Prevention Commission had a number of recommendations regarding how police interact with LGBTQIA. And some of those may work, some of those may not be workable for us. I'd like to go through those as well, if we could.
Well, then, next board meeting, I would recommend that we have a presentation by the Bureau of Professional Standards, and that we also have some sort of review and response to the St. Louis Violence Prevention.
Yeah, that would be fine, if that's agreeable. I think we don't want to let these things go. And, you know, also I didn't, in on 4, keeping data on use of force, and if there's desperate use of force, I think we want to see what data we have and what the considerations are about tracking that and following it to make sure that we're doing the best we can to serve all the people.
Certainly.
I have a question about the same item of the end of the response that says, we just need the permission to do it. Where does that permission come from?
Well, I have not seen a presentation on this yet from Lieutenant Dolly, but once I see the presentation, I can give permission to do that. We already collect data at the end of the year and provide a report on the use of force. It is not broken down, which I think was part of Dr. Punch's request. It's not broken down by precinct or area. It is an aggregate amount of data. So in order to do that, Lieutenant Dolly has let me know that it would be possible to do that in some type of open portal, but it's something we have not started yet, but I think that it is possible to do that. Did I say that correctly, Colby? Okay.
Any other comments? Okay, very good.
Thank you.
Lieutenant, crime statistics.
Commissioner Price, can you get a little closer to your mic?
Yes, I will. There we go.
And you can tilt yours and yours a little closer to your mouth. And, yeah.
All right, good morning. I'll try to speak and project so the mic can hear me. It doesn't sound quite tall enough. I'm Colby Alley, Lieutenant over Research and Analysis for those watching on the web. Most of you here know me. So I'm going to go over crime statistics update through August of 2020 for the department, just my normal qualifiers for this. This is only St. Louis County patrol area, so it's not the entire county. It's about 400,000 people we're talking about. These stats are through the end of August, so the 2 weeks here in September are not accounted for, so that may cause discrepancies with other publications you may see. And then these are based off of approved reports. So again, it's sort of an accounting method, but that's what we always put on. So just my normal qualifiers here. Okay, so let me get the slides moving here. Dean, are we, oh, where's Dean? Nope, there we go. Just trying to get the mouse going. Okay, so here we're going to look at the month of August for the last 3 years and how we compare them year to date. So I highlighted the things here as I usually do, the things that we maybe want to pay attention to. So the ag assaults with firearms we usually pay close attention to. So Lieutenant Longworth was mentioning we're at 550 for the year. That's almost a 29% increase for the year compared to 2019. So that number, the line chart that you saw in his presentation was a very good illustration of sort of the magnitude of how we're going up year by year, a very disturbing trend. And unfortunately, that continues into 2020 as well. So, you know, projecting out, we're gonna be probably well over 700, maybe 800 by the end of the year. So, some things that are maybe a little bit of a bright spot here are when we look at the burglaries and larcenies down further on the chart. Those, and Dean, if you can move the owl picture there. Yeah, so thank you. The burglaries and larcenies are down for the year. And a lot of that, I believe, has to do with COVID, especially those burglary numbers are down substantially. And again, I said this last month, but what we find is most people who break into homes don't want to have a confrontation with anybody. So with all the people at home, working from home, those are going down. Same with the larcenies, you know, a lot of the businesses were closed, or you had some type of modified entry-exit system where it's one way in, same way out. So I think that's all contributing to the numbers in larceny being down generally. Last thing I'll mention on this is the motor vehicle thefts. Those continue to be up. We're over 1,000 for the year, up 17%. So continuing trend from last year, like we've seen a lot of this stuff. So the next slide here, I'm going to go to it. This is going to show the last 5 months. So it kind of gives us an idea of how things are trending one way or another for these different crimes, same categories. Again, we'll look at ag assaults with firearms. So if we look at those, we had a really bad month in July. It came down just a little bit here. In August, we're about to our moving average, but those continue to be high. If you look at the burglaries, so that's down on the table a little bit. Those burglaries, you'll notice, they dip down in May and June, and then they're sort of creeping back up again. Again, I think that's a COVID-related issue that people are now leaving their homes, going back to work. Maybe some of them are going back to school, so that's where we're going to see those increase. And same a little bit for the larcenies. Those were depressed a lot in the early months of COVID, and now we're kind of creeping back. So I think that I will say that normally what you see is at the end of the summer, sort of around this time, the numbers start to usually fall. We sort of hit our peak in this, what is the third quarter, sort of the end of the third quarter, in a normal year. So I think we'll probably see that dip a little bit. And then you see another rise around Christmas time, people out and about for the holidays. So next slide here is talking about our performance indicators. So again, just to reiterate, I've said this before, but you know, we want to look at other stuff just besides crime numbers to sort of evaluate how effective the police department is. And so these are some of those things that we can look at. You know, we look at citizen complaints, internal investigations, uses of force, department vehicle accidents, these vehicle pursuits. So all of these, well, just about all of these things are down or around the same as they were last year. So this is pretty good progress on this. We don't have any high numbers on any of these things. You know, a little bit of an increase on vehicle pursuits, but those are pretty small numbers. So this is all looking good. The vehicle accidents, again, you know, we don't know for sure. Those numbers are down 15%. That's maybe likely to COVID. Officers are doing less as far as driving around, going to calls, may have a little bit of an impact there. Our next slide here, we're going to talk about directed calls for service. So again, just as a reminder, the directed calls for service are when a citizen picks up the phone, calls the police, calls our communications center, and they want an officer dispatch for whatever reason that may be. No real surprise here. So if we look at that last column, and I'll try to, we're actually joking about this, using laser pointer. So if we look at the August numbers here, they actually went down a little bit, which again, I think that's to be expected. Most of the precincts anyway went down just slightly. But again, as you get to the end of the summer, usually you do see a little bit of a decrease in calls with that. So we'll go to the next slide. So if we look at our self-initiated calls for service, these have some relationship to your directed calls for service in the very busy precincts especially. So as
Lieutenant,
yes,
we've been asked to pause our meeting for a second.
Okay.
Can you finish up in a little bit? And let me read the closed meeting notice. The Board of Police Commissioners may vote to go into closed meeting for review of claims and lawsuits involving the police department, Section 610-0211 RS-MO, and Section 114-0201 SLCRO, discussion of employee and personnel matters, section 610, 0213, and 13 RSMO, and sections 114, 0203, and 13 SLCRO, and an update on union negotiations, section 610, 0219, RSMO, and section 114, 0209, SLCRO, and specifications for competitive bidding, section 610, 021, 11 RSMO, and section 114, 020, 11 SLCRO. Sorry for this inconvenience. We will be back as soon as we can. Oh, yes, we need a vote. Can we have a
I
motion and a
vote
vote?
to move.
Thank you.
I second.
Can we have a roll call vote?
Commissioner Gardner,
Yes.
Commissioner Hassler,
Yes.
Commissioner Price,
Yes.
Commissioner Punch,
Yes.
Commissioner Schwerin.
Yes.
Oh, it's a different, okay, the reason we're doing this, we got a message that we needed to pause the meeting immediately. And just so that nobody's it's a technical difficulty. So we'll let him work out the technical difficulty and then we'll come back. There's no asteroid yet.